Namaste. Welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity. And we're going to continue answering questions from the jar. I pull out a question and I do my best to answer it within a 10-minute time frame. And as I do that, of course, my answers are going to be completely imperfect. I'm trying to talk off the cuff and do so impromptu without any editing or revision of the I'm looking down to get my timer of the video. So I'm ready to start. I'm going to pull in, see what I put my hand in, not pull in, and grab one. And I grabbed one. I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to exhale. And then I'm going to look at the question. Okay, I'm going to press start. And I will answer the question. The question was, are you a yogi? And what does that mean to you? Are you a yogi? And what does that mean to you? I know I often refer to myself as a yogi. It's the quickest way to explain that I'm a person who practices yoga. But yogi is a conceptual identity. And I do my best these days to stay clear of conceptual identities. I may use the terms and words used to describe things that people will understand, but I try not to get attached to those identities. I try not to identify myself as being a yogi. I am a person who, amongst other things, practices yoga. I have great reverence and appreciation for the teachings of yoga. I've studied yoga for many, many years, probably going on to 30 years now. I practiced the hatha component that long, and I began becoming very interested in the teachings themselves once I got past my own conditioned way of thinking it was woo-woo and I shouldn't go there. My fear of the unknown and a fear of, doing anything against my conditioned way of thinking. So once I got past that, probably about 20 years ago, I began to study the teachings and philosophies of yoga. And it became quite enthralled. That led me to study, Eastern traditions a little bit more deeply and the wisdom that can be found in those traditions, not just yoga, but the tradition from which it, emerged, which would have been Hinduism. So I looked into Hinduism, and then, of course, in India, we also have Buddhism, so I looked into Buddhism, and then from Buddhism, I found myself extending to Taoism, and I looked into that. And of course, I still, even though I may not be practicing Catholic anymore, I'm still very interested in the teachings of Christ. So I looked at those at a different level, maybe in a yogic perspective, because I truly think that they're in those missing years that Christ may, if there's a possibility, travel to the East to study there. I also, loved the poetry that comes from India, like Tagore, and from Persia as well, Hafiz, and which is now Iran, he came from, and Rumi. There's so much about the Eastern tradition that I love. Now, I sum all that and wrap that all under my practicing of yoga. So yoga, we know, is according to Patanjali, we don't know when, of course, he came around to be, but his teachings were shared with students who transcribed what he said into what's called sutras, little bits of wisdom. And those sutras have been passed on, and people can read those sutras today, as I have done, and the sutras of Patanjali. And depending on who's translating and interpreting them, they can be very beneficial to our understanding of yoga and what it means to be a yogi. But again, I can't stress enough that yogi is just a conceptual identity. It's just a label, and we are so much more than labels. Labels point to something, concepts point to something, but we are that that exists beyond the label, and actually beyond that which is being identified by the label. So yoga will help us to understand that. So yoga is all about achieving a certain state of self-realization, and that self is with a capital S rather than a lowercase s. and that means the true self. It's a way of coming back to who we are, coming home to who we are, understanding and realizing that which we have forgotten somehow, that which we have removed our focus from in our busy worlds, trying to keep up with physicality, the temporal nature of physicality, with impermanence and with the busyness of this life that we tend to think is the only reality. When in reality, when we practice yoga and get into those deeper states, we realize who we are with a capital S. So yeah, I do call myself a yogi, but very loosely. I don't try not to get too identified with that. And unlike the yogis maybe that spent their years in Himalayan caves and were known as rishis, and exploring the laboratories of soul research, which was what they considered to be the mind, I probably am not seeking transcendence in the sense. I'm not seeking to get beyond anything. To me, yoga is a very practical way of being. Yoga is a way of experiencing life. So yogi is a very practical way of being, and yoga is a practice that helps us to do that. Though there are 8 limbs, and I do practice most of them, I'm not interested. I should say I'm not interested. My goal isn't samadhi and these siddhis that come, these supernatural powers that some people say you can get when you reach a certain level of consciousness that extends the bodily limitations, extends beyond the bodily limitations. I am more interested in the peace that surpasses understanding that we can get from yoga, the end of suffering for myself and others, and I think yoga is a way to help that. It is one path I take, and of course the path I take as a so-called yogi is different than a traditional yogi would take, and it's different than the person down the street might take, or if they're practicing hatha yoga only, and they may call themselves a yogi. So everybody has a different connotation for the word yogi, and my connotation is a very universal and holistic approach to becoming the best. I want to say people, but it's actually beyond people. We can be the best beings we can be, maintaining the highest level of beingness. And so that's what I'm attempting to gain, that higher state of being. And that's why I'm a yogi. I use all different types of approaches, not just the Eastern tradition, the South Asian tradition from which yoga comes. I, extend it a little bit beyond there, like I have said, and I try to incorporate it all into my practice. So I'm a person who practices a very unique, holistic, non-denominational form of yoga. And to me, yoga isn't something woo-woo and mystical and esoteric. It is a very practical way of being, of becoming, of resting in the felt experience of what is, I guess. And that's where self, with the capital S, takes us once we extend back beyond all this thing that's superimposed in front of us, back to the isness and the presence, and to the awareness and the consciousness from which all these things emerge. Then we have that felt experience of being, and we are looking out from those eyes as a yogi who has advanced to that certain level, and seeing the world in a totally different way. We are not over-identified with our problems and over-identified with the fluctuations that are going on in front of us, the arising and the dissolving of phenomena, the emotions, the thoughts, the experiences, the relationships, the whatever. We are less attached as a yogi, in my mind, in my conceptualization of what a yogi is, what I strive to be as a yogi. We are less attached and more fluent and more like flowing with life rather than against life, resisting. It's a non-resistant way of being too, is another way of looking at it. Resistance is the thing that tends to cause us our problems, and this is resist the moments in life and resist life in general. We're not truly living and truly being in the felt experience of what is. So we learn to become relaxed, and that's what the hatha component is all about, relaxing. into the what isness of life. So I do call myself a yogi, but it's very loosely. I try not to over-identify in that label. I try to stay detached from it, even though I may use it because I don't know how else to make sense of what I do. And I do have great reference for yoga and what it has done for mankind over the years and what it has the potential to do for the humanity in the future if we were all to become a little bit more self-realized. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing day. Namaste.